To begin with, Chuck, local football, and we begin with a local legend, right? Noko Matlou, who retired after a match against Malawi. After 175 odd caps for Banyana Banyana, has called time on her illustrious career for the national team. What have you made of her career? What do you make of her as she sails into the sunset?
Noko played long enough for me to not really be interested in Banyana Banyana and then have an interest and then realize, oh, okay, I actually like this team. I actually like the brand of football. She actually played long enough where I was a bit maybe ignorant and didn't really appreciate the women's game. And after a while, after having turned my mind around, she was still there. Started off obviously as a striker, was banging the goals as much as, like I said, I didn't have my eye on them. Kept cheering over Noko Matlou, always scoring, always being on the score sheet and sometimes getting gluttonous amount of goals in certain matches. And she was really dominant in that position, right? And when I started to tune into Banyana more regularly, that's when she was at the twilight of her career as a striker. But the girl was so good that it was not the end of her career. She then went to play as a wing back. I think, Jay, that's amazing. That's a revelation, number one. Number two, the longevity of her career speaks volumes because, number one, the number of caps. Number two, her staying power in the national team. And just her being effective till the end, because you have players where you're like, we want to play you, we like you, you've earned cult status or legendary status in the team, but you're not that good anymore. Whereas with Noko Matlou, we would just say at best, you can't score those goals anymore like you did, but there's always space for you in a Banyana shirt. So I think that's amazing, Jay. If you think about how everything happened much later and she stuck around for that, getting her first professional contract at the age of 35. That's crazy. Where she goes to play for IBA at 35, that's longevity. She won her first trophy with Banyana Banyana at the AFCON at 33. No, at 36 actually. At 33, she played her first World Cup. So these are all numbers that most players don't even last till, and she was still effective for Banyana Banyana. So Jay, she was a great ambassador for the game. She was great for the girls, got the girls dreaming, got the girls believing, and I like the fact that Jay, we've come to a point where we've changed our minds into what our heroes look like, right? Because oftentimes footballers, remember you used to get derided for not being able to speak English very well. He's one of the players who, is Peli Sagibo, and she was fine. And we've got to understand, not only via her, but throughout the entire world, that, you know what, you don't have to speak English. You embrace the people as they are. I think what Rasi once said when he was explaining the dynamic of his Springboks, we don't just get there because now we're all Springboks stronger together and we get along. There's someone someone else is from the farm, very different, if you understand. Someone else is from the hood, someone else is from the burbs, and they all speak different languages. They all have different cultural backgrounds, and they also have to somehow make it work. So with Noko Matlou, I understand that Jermaine is more marketable in terms of she can speak the English, she has got the long flowing hair, whatever. But Noko let her football speak, and you got to realize that, you know what, all that stuff doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you're just a footballer, and boy was she a good footballer. The numbers speak for herself in terms of caps, goals scored, longevity, being able to play in the local game, playing abroad as well, Jay. So I think you can't look at that career and scoff at it. You can't look at that career and belittle it. 174, I think that's the second most capped player, Jay, period, male or female in Africa. So that's amazing.
If you came to the career of Noko Matlou with Banyana Banyana, if you came across her in the latter times, the last 5 years, the last 10 years even actually, and you just looked up her record, if you watched the team and you knew that, okay, that's one of our defenders, and then you looked up her record and you recognized how many games she's played, and then next to that, when you see the goal total, you would be utterly confused as to what is going on here, particularly because it's not as if when you've been watching her as a wing back, she's been delivering goals, right? And when you then do dig into what transpired, how does she have 66, I believe, goals in her Banyana Banyana career while playing as a defender? You then uncover the fact that she was a striker before, right? Before she became a defender. And the thing is, we've seen players play multiple positions, and even in terms of being formerly an attack and then becoming a defender. In my mind, the things that come to mind very readily is the boys from Tembisa. One Teti Mawa, or known as Utivo, and in the hood, he was known as a pass master, as someone who plays in the middle of the park, right? But then when we saw him at the professional level in the PSL, saw him play as a defender, as a right back for the most part. And then the other person I think of is George Moleg, who aptly named Umido because coming up through the ranks, to the youth ranks, he was a striker and a prolific one at that. And then when you saw him at Ajax Cape Town, he also was a right back and then settled into being a midfielder. And then if you think abroad, you think then in terms of transitioning because of age, because that is something that happens. That's something that happened with Noko Matlou, where you've got a Paolo Maldini, who is considered the best left back of all time in many circles. But then again, if you came to his career, let's say later towards the end, you saw him play as a left centre back. But that's a more conventional switch, right? You already are a defender, and you are a great defensive left back or full back, and the switch to being a centre back is not as big a jump. As what you see with Noko Matlou, because even the guys I mentioned, that was, yes, at the PSL level. It was not at international level, because as a striker, right, she was not just she's an okay striker, she's a good striker, and it's like, man, we need someone to fill in at the back. She can play there as well. It's like, actually, this is maybe your best position, because when she was playing as a forward, as far back as 2008, she becomes the first South African to win the Women's African Player of the Year, whether male or female player. She was that good. She was dominant as a striker. I remember, and this was a time, as you say, where it was not maybe as fashionable for us to be watching Banyana Banyana. I know certainly not for me. But I knew of Matlou because she kept on making the news headlines, because she scored once again, and she scored multiple goals. And in that year, which culminated with her winning the Women's African Player of the Year, she was in the headlines so many times that you could not miss her, because she just kept on scoring. And then when you did catch her, whether it was in the highlights or, hey man, Banyana Banyana playing, let me actually see this Noko Matlou that keeps making the news headlines, she was utterly dominant. Like she was fast, she was powerful, she was athletic, and she was prolific, as I'm saying, in front of goal. And it's like, oh man, are we watching the greatest South African female player of all time? Is this someone who's going to go on and challenge the goal records of Uposha Modise? Didn't happen at the end, because she did then lose some of that athleticism. But to be able to transition from a prolific, a world-class striker to being a defender. You mentioned the fact that she signed her first professional contract in her late 30s, or in her mid-30s rather. That's as a defender. So she went from being international level world-class as a striker, and then in the latter parts of her career, she becomes a defender, and she's so good that she's playing in the Premier Division of women's football in Spain. And even as she calls time on her international career, she signed now again a 1-year contract in the second division of the Spanish league. So that for me, Chuck, in terms of when we talk about what a complete football player is, that screams complete football player. To be able to make that transition, that is the highlight for me in terms of her career. That how are you able to be that good as an attacker, as a forward, as a striker, a prolific goal scorer, and then you are just as good when you then become a defender? Because it wasn't a matter of, we just want to keep her around in the team, let's just find a position for her. No, she was better than everybody else she was competing against at that position. And I tip my hat off to her as she walks away, saying that she wants to make room for the newer generation to come through and take up the baton, because what a servant she has been. And and sometimes you say that, right, as the courteous thing to say, but in terms of Noko Matlou, what a career. As I'm saying, it still boggles my mind how you went from being world class at one position and a totally different position. You then continued and in the second half of your career, and that's what you became, a legend of note.
I mean, Jay, if you think about it, from coming close, if we could say that, like having our best display at the WAFCON, she was a striker. And then when she comes back to actually win it, she's making crucial saves to actually get us over the line. Then she's there in the World Cup in our deepest run, and you're like, Noko's been there at almost every milestone of this particular version. In terms of what Banyana looked like. Every key milestone that we've achieved in terms of winning the WAFCON, going to the World Cups and scoring goals, making a noise on the continent, making a noise on the world. Noko's been there. And I think man, when you actually look at her age, you're like, okay, I get it. You've had enough of this game because you've given us so much of your life. Whether it's a striker, whether it's a defender, it's all been world class. It's all been amazing, and I mean, hard to replicate that. I mean, if you were to take the striker career and I take the defender career, we wouldn't be upset. That's how good she was.